You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
All right, and welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and I am joined, as always, by your co-hosts, Kevin and Alex. Guys, how we doing tonight?
Doing good. I'm in the middle of a rookie dynasty draft for my work league. That's it's an auction league that started last year, so we're going through the rookie draft now. And man, do I hate my team, but I'm glad I have good rookies coming in, so I'm happy about that. And other than that, just working my way through the Best Ball Satellite Tournament for Scott Fish Bowl, and pretty happy with my team there. But not much to complain about. I'm drafting. I get to look at players and analyze them. Like I'm happy as can be.
I have actually, honest to goodness, since we did the team, Derek, that you and I were co-owning in one of the leagues that we all started from, I think it spawned from draft night, really, when we did that special. I haven't done any fantasy drafts. So I see your face and I recognize that. But that just dawned on me that it's been a minute since I've done any fantasy football drafting. So I guess take whatever I say with a grain of salt, because I'm out of the game for a second here. But it's almost time for me to turn my full attention to it and really get into it. And for the first time in a long time, I will be able to actually kind of turn some attention to it, because my job won't be asking quite so much of me during actual football season. So that'll be a lot of fun.
There you go. I don't know how you go as long as you've gone without drafting. Like I get to a point where if I don't have a draft going, within, probably a week or so, like I start going, I got to go find another league, man. Like it's so, I don't know how you can go that long.
I will say it's not because I don't partake in other forms of friendly competition with other people. I am in a golf pool, a major pool for golf that I've got some money tied up in. And actually, by some weird form of happenstance, I was in pretty much dead last after the Masters, and now I think I'm in second place overall after the US Open, which everybody except for me, which I won that one, just had a horrible outing. So British Open this weekend, I've got to turn some attention to that to make sure that I can make some more money off of those guys, of which I know two other people in this pool. There's like 10 of us, I think, and I only know two other people in it, but I'm still there to take their money. That's fine by me. And so once that major season passes, it'll be full on football for me.
There you go. I just pretty much full-time football all the time, and we'll sprinkle some other stuff in here and there. More on this just a single game betting type of thing is how I get down on those ones. But guys, we have a great show for you tonight. We're going to talk some New Orleans Saints football. We've got our tight end rankings that we're going to be bringing to you. Do us a favor, hop over onto YouTube, click that little subscribe button, hit that little bell. We bring the show to you live every Tuesday night, 11 p.m. Eastern, as well as we're over there on Twitch and Twitter live as well. Give us a follow on any of those three platforms. We very much appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in. Guys, let's go ahead and hit up some Saints. We got the New Orleans Saints last year, and changing of an era, which I'm sure we'll get into very heavily here. Drew Brees will no longer be the quarterback, but before we get into the quarterback room, we're going to start where we always do, and that is in the running back room. So we are going to start with Alvin Kamara, who finished as the running back 1 last year, 187 rush attempts, 932 rushing yards, 16 touchdowns, 83 receptions for 107 through the targets through the air, and 756 yards, 5 touchdowns. Guys, your thoughts on Alvin Kamara?
I love Alvin Kamara. I have a decent amount of shares of him sprinkled throughout my many leagues. The one I'm most fond of is a regular work half point PPR dynasty league where I picked him up as a rookie and have been able to pair him with Zeke and kind of ride him through there. So that's been nice for me. But Kamara, obviously the biggest question mark with Kamara is, does he catch 80 balls from Jameis Winston / Taysom Hill? That's going to be a tough number to get to with Jameis and Taysom, even with the extra game. But what I do think we see is I think we see him go over 1,000 yards rushing. I think that the 21 total touchdowns, I think we see some regression there. I think we're probably going to end up seeing somewhere closer to 15, 16 total touchdowns is what I would think. And coming up for the season redraft league, I have him finishing at RB6. So still very respectable. That's pretty much where he's going off of draft boards. So he's still a first-round talent. He's still a guy that you want to have on your roster. He's still a guy that's going to get tons and tons of usage because even though Drew Brees is no longer with the Saints, Sean Payton is still the head coach, and he knows that he has two major playmakers on offense. One is Alvin Kamara, and the other is a guy that we will get to shortly in Michael Thomas.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is the question mark around how does Kamara fare without Drew Brees? And we've seen small sample sizes, right? When Drew was hurt and Jameis or Taysom really was the quarterback there. And my biggest concern is whichever way that they go, if they go with a Taysom Hill, to me still has not developed into the quarterback. I mean, nobody on that roster is Drew Brees, obviously, but to me, he's still a first, maybe second read before he's going to tuck and run and just try and get whatever he can. And so the reason why I think Kamara worked so well with Drew Brees is because Drew Brees was the smartest player on the field whenever he was out there. And he understood what defenses were trying to do, and he understood what defenses would give him, and he understood how to utilize his playmakers. Now, the two guys that are still left on that roster, they're not at the level, the mental level that Drew Brees was at or is at still, really. I think the only reason that Drew Brees had to hang it up was because his body could not keep up with what his mind was asking of it. And so that to me is a very big question mark, and it's a very scary situation. All that being said, I still think, again, Kevin, I'm with you there. I think that Kamara's, going to be a threat, and he's a first round, running back. I don't know. I mean, there are a handful of guys that I'd take in front of him, but he's still a guy that I'd like to have on my roster.
You bring up some really good points there, and even with Drew Brees, because we saw what this thing might look like without Drew Brees in it when he missed some time last year with that rib injuries and all of that. And you still saw Alvin Kamara put up some very, very good weeks, even with Taysom Hill being the quarterback. And if Jameis Winston is the quarterback there, I think that actually helps Kamara more than Taysom Hill being there. But Kevin, I'm kind of right there along with you on that one. I see him with over 1,000 yards rushing. I see him going to actually break that 200-yard carry mark for one of the first times in his career. I think the Saints will utilize him a little bit more on the ground than they have necessarily in the past, and so you'll see probably a little bit more of a traditional running game than what they used in the past, where you saw Drew Brees and that short passing game kind of substitute a little bit for a run game in there. So I think some of that'll happen in there. But yeah, I think he's easily going to be probably, I'm still working through my rankings right now. He's in running back number 3, but that could change. I've only got about half of those guys statted out right now and still working through the redo on that one. But Alex, I'm thinking that you're thinking that he should be a keeper this year.
No comment. I'm not in a keeper league or a keeper league at the moment, so
Yes, you are. We just
comment.
Need to draft it.
So for everybody just tuning in, on the very first episode of this show, Alex talked about how he didn't keep Alvin Kamara for our home league, which is a keeper league, and 2 years later, it ended up working out okay for you because you won the ship on that one. But would have been interesting to see what would have happened on that one. But
if I keep him, then I don't get Derrick Henry, and I don't get Derrick Henry during his awesome run that we had last year and ride him to a fantasy football championship. So everything works out, okay?
No, but you get Alvin Kamara and his 6 tutties in the championship game. Like, and
that was pretty
I don't think we're
impressive.
See that again. That was epic, right? That game, just the singular performance that Alvin Kamara put on in that game is something to behold. And I don't know if we're ever going to see anything quite like that. Again, it was just very cool to see. I don't expect that to happen. And the offense is going to function slightly differently, which is why I'm thinking there's going to be some touchdown regression there. But Alvin Kamara is coming into his 5th season, guys, and he still has a ton of tread on his tires. Like, through 6 seasons, he only has 672 career rush attempts. Derek has that in 2.5 seasons.
Yeah.
So, through 4 seasons, he has that. Sorry. And so, one thing else he also has is a nose for the end zone, because through that he also has 43 touchdowns. Like, so that puts you right there, almost 11, right? So the average is 11 touchdowns. You know, if we can get above 200 carries, hit that 1,000-yard mark, you know, even if he's slightly down on receptions, right? Like, sprinkle in, you know, somewhere in that 70 to 75 neighborhood. Derek, I think you might have him for a little bit more than that. And we'll see where that shakes out. But I think it's all within the realm of possibility here. Like, if you're in any type of a half point or full point PPR, like, that is still gold. Like, 10 touchdowns, 70 receptions out of your running back, not to mention 200 carries. And, you know, the goal, right? What we're all hoping is 1,000+ yards for the first time in his career. Like, he could have an extremely good season and, quite frankly, be very quiet about it, because the focus on that team is going to be at the quarterback position and what they're doing this year. Alvin Kamara is going to get through the first half of the season without most people even remembering. I shouldn't say remembering who he is, but almost him being a side story for the New Orleans Saints. He's not going to be up front and center on that team.
All right, I will caveat, you know, his number 1 ranking last year, because we have to remember, right? Again, you can only go up against who you play, type deal here. But Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley both missed practically all of last season. So I'm just, you know, he was running back 1, but, you know, and he had a 6 touchdown game, which really, really helps that ranking. And he had Drew Brees on the field with him almost at all times. So
except for like the 5 games that he missed, the 6 games that he missed, you know, a third of the season. Right.
But 2/3 of Drew Brees is still, hell, it's still better than what the freaking Broncos are going to roll out there this year. But that is something that you got to keep in mind. Now, so I will go with this as well. You guys are picking at number 3. If you're picking at number 3, okay, and your move is to go running back early, do you go? We all assume that well, for this exercise, we'll assume that CMC and Dalvin Cook are both gone. Who do you take there at 3?
For me, it's a toss-up between Derrick Henry and Zeke. And Derrick Henry because of the usage, the volume that comes with it. Zeke because I want a piece of the Cowboys, and I'm not guaranteed that I'm going to get Zach or Dak, especially in a super flex. It's not necessarily going to come back to me. I could get a receiver, but I do have a love affair with Zeke Elliott. But I think now that team's back together, we talked about this when we covered the Cowboys. Like, I expect him to finish inside the top 5 and kind of get back to that normal self. The offensive line is going to be healthy again. I think the defense is improved. They may not be significantly better, but they are improved. But being able to utilize all those weapons means there's not going to be a stacked box all the time. Zeke in his own right, he got targeted. I think he got targeted 65 times out of the backfield last season. So for me at number 3, it's Derrick Henry or Zeke. I'm probably going to lean Zeke because he also gets me the receptions, but I wouldn't argue it anyway.
Yeah, I'm probably kind of in that same boat. Probably leaning the Derrick Henry route just because I think he'll have, again, over 350 opportunities when it's all said and done, which is probably pretty close to what you'll see with Alvin Kamara. When you conclude both his passing targets and rushing attempts, I think they'll be similar when it's all said and done this season. But I'm going to take Derrick Henry, who just that's the identity of that team, is just to pound the ball and run, probably in that 3 spot. But it's a close one for me on that one for sure. So, all righty, let's go ahead.
Alex is making notes so that way
I would also go Derrick Henry
in the draft.
That's what I have. I have Derrick Henry ranked 3rd. I was just seeing how highly you guys actually did see Alvin Kamara. I know you said 5, Kevin. I know that you were there 5, but just to see if you would quote unquote reach.
I don't know that you can go wrong there at that time, right? Like the consensus 1 and 2 is pretty much McCaffrey and Cook, right? That's kind of across the industry. But once you get 3 through 7, really, like you have Zeke, you have Derrick Henry, you have Alvin Kamara, and you have Jonathan Taylor, like,
and Saquon.
Don't forget about Nick Chubb.
Yeah, okay. I like Nick Chubb a lot, but he shares a little bit too much time with Kareem Hunt. Anyway, but once you get into those, it's kind of a dealer's choice, right? It's whatever you feel comfortable with drafting. So you can go to a bunch of different sites, the mainstream sites, the pod sites like what we have, and all the, access of information. And we might all have them ranked slightly differently, but they're all kind of in that core group. And really, as a drafter on draft day, what you should take from that is it's dealer's choice. Take the guy you're most comfortable with. If you're just a fan of one of these guys, there's no problem taking that. You're not being a fanboy and reaching for a guy. Like, all these guys could finish as high as they could finish as high as 1, or they could finish as low as 8. Realistically, all that's still first round talent. Look at any sort of mock draft, and 10 or 11 out of the 12 first round picks are running backs. So it's still first round talent. You're getting first round production out of these guys. So go with your gut, go with what you like, and let the season play out how it will. But I don't feel like there's a drastically wrong choice as far as drafting one of those running backs in the first round. It's just a comfort thing. What do you feel comfortable with?
Right. And what you're talking about too, a lot of that has to do with how you have your tiers broken out there as well. And that's something that we typically draft within as kind of our tiers and how we have that set up. And we'll get into a lot of those tier based rankings as the off season unfolds here. And we'll have that, wide receiver, running back, tight end, and quarterback ranking shows coming up with those 4 weeks leading up to the start of the season there. So make sure you guys are tuning in for that one. Always a lot of fun to see how we kind of see these guys and where those tier breaks are. But that's a lot of what you're talking about there is just, if your guy's in the same tier, take the guy that you're most comfortable with and move along and set your draft board up accordingly with that. So, guys, let's go ahead and head on over to Latavius Murray, who finished as running back 33 last year, 146 rush attempts, 656 yards, 4 rushing touchdowns. Had a little bit of work through the air with 23 receptions, 26 targets, 176 yards, and 1 touchdown through the air. Guys, your thoughts on Latavius Murray?
Lat Murray is a guy that I probably haven't targeted enough late in drafts. He's been falling down draft boards. I think his ADP is somewhere around 45. So getting that type of production, again, Sean Payton's still the head coach and the offensive mastermind behind the New Orleans Saints. So you're going to have a different face under center, but some of these philosophies are going to stay the same regardless of who's there. And so Latavius Murray is a nice piece to have because he's a standalone backup, right? You can put him, he can be a bench player on your team, but you can throw him in on a flex for whether it's a matchup or whether you have guys on bye or if Kamara gets nicked up, right? And that happens from time to time. It's a long season, but Latavius Murray does have standalone value to be able to carry that workload on his own. We've seen that through the course of his time with the Saints if Kamara does go down. So he's a guy that I like. I do like him because I feel like I can get value off of him where he's going off of draft boards. I know there's been a couple times where I think I've waited just around too long. I haven't talked myself into it enough and thinking that I'm going to sneak him back to me. And I keep getting picked off. So I need to adjust my thought process on that. But he's a guy that you can have comfort with. He's a safe floor. They're going to use him every week. So you do get consistent production out of him. And then, on the weeks where if you have to play him, you're just hoping for a touchdown, right? Like that's what you need to set him up to continue to get him into that consistent mid to upper end of RB3, low end RB2 status. Is you need the touchdown to go with the production, but he's a guy who complements Kamara well, and the Saints do a good job of using his skill set within the offense to make sure he's a productive piece for them.
I mean, it wasn't too long ago that he was like the dude. Even in Minnesota, he was one of the guys that I think it was after Dalvin Cook got hurt. He had to become the focal part of that team's offense, that team's running game. So while he's not the young pup that he once was, he's still not that old. But yeah, I'm with you, Kevin, in that he does have standalone value, but he really, I mean, I think if you do have Kamara, he's a guy that you should want to target, but hope that he doesn't pass you by, because that is a decent fill-in if Kamara goes down. I think it's crazy, though, that he had 4 touchdowns on the ground and 1 through the air is what you said, Derek, right?
Yep.
And Kamara had 6 in one game. So the 5 touchdowns that he scored all of last season did not equal one of Kamara's amazing, unbelievable football games against, mind you, the Vikings was who that game was that eliminated them from the playoffs last year. I think if he can find the end zone a little bit more, then I would be a little bit more comfortable with his standalone value. But to me, I view him more as a handcuff than a guy that I am really targeting as standalone value.
So Peng's picks chiming in there, saying that he had a couple of 6-game touchdowns happen. I like that comment. Peng's picks actually had a pretty good question that he threw out there on Sports Me, and Latavius Murray kind of highlights this one. So that's why I'm going to kind of pivot here a little bit. But so the question is, do you shy away from some of these guys in the mid-round running backs, kind of that dreaded 4th, 5th round type of deal? Latavius Murray could be a reason to kind of shift away from that a little bit because of the fact that when you look at what you were going to get in the 5th round, like, you're talking guys like Myles Gaskin, you're talking guys like Mike Davis, Leonard Fournette, kind of those names are the guys falling in kind of that 5th round in that area there. And the question that where it comes back to my mind is that Latavius Murray is not going to score that many less fantasy points than any of those guys that I just mentioned there. You're probably talking a couple of points a week type of thing, but what you can get in the 4th, 5th round from a wide receiver standpoint is drastically going to outperform that. And, if you're talking single QB leagues, at that point, you could take a shot on a guy like a Kyler, a Dak, even Josh Allen has kind of fallen into that 4th round in some of those as well. So those are all guys that you could take your shot on there as well. But Latavius Murray kind of, making me think back to that battle that I hopped in. And that was a great one that Peng's picks threw out there on the Sports Me. Shout out to him.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think this year, more so than years past, it feels like you have to hit running back. You either have to hit it early or you have to really wait and be patient and then get the top end wide receivers. If you're going, the true zero RB strategy, right? Whether you go tight end 1st round or whether you grab a Hopkins or Devonta Adams, Tyreek Hill, those guys that are at the top of the wide receiver ADP at the moment, and then kind of fall down. And then, you're resting on guys that you think you can pick up late, picking up maybe a Kareem Hunt in the 6th, a Latavius Murray in the 9th or 10th, and being able to kind of fill that in. Fournette seems to be the hot name in Tampa Bay. Well, I'm waiting an extra round and a half, 2 rounds, depending on what room you're in, and I'll take Rojo. I don't need Fournette. So there's nothing wrong with that strategy. It's not one that I enjoy implementing, but I have done it from time to time. But yes, as far as the early mid rounds, if you will, I wouldn't get forced into it. Myles Gaskin has some allure because it seems like the Dolphins are really okay with riding a true number 1 back, and they don't do that weird 55-45 split where you're kind of having to figure things out, kind of like San Francisco, right? Like Trey Sermon, Wayne Gallman, Raheem Mostert. Like, is it going to be jumbled in between? All those guys are kind of, well, Gallman's not. Mostert and Sermon are, though. Why take the chance of starting the wrong guy who may not have standalone value on any given week? Wait a couple rounds, pick up a guy like Latavius Murray, Kareem Hunt. These are backups that aren't real backups. They have workhorse ability. They're just playing in a 2-back system where their floor is higher than everybody else around them. Yeah.
So it's definitely, I got to give it to everybody that does the 0 RB, because it's not for the faint of heart. I don't enjoy that draft strategy there at all. In fact, you two have played in enough leagues with me to know that if it's a single QB league, I'm drafting running back in the first 3 rounds. And if it's super flex, I'm taking 1 quarterback in the first 3 rounds and the other 2 are running backs, typically always. So definitely some good call outs and a good topic there that Peng's Pick put on the Sports Me app. If you guys haven't downloaded that, download the Sports Me app, hop over there, join the battle. Well worth the time and energy, and it's a lot of fun. So guys, let's go ahead and head on over into the wide receiver room, and they've got a good one over there. Michael Thomas, who had a bit of a down year, one could say, off of the injury, right? He had that ankle injury very early on in the season to it, never quite really returned to form, kind of struggled to come back to play that last season with Drew Brees, but he had 40 receptions on 55 targets, 438 yards, 0 touchdown. Guys, your thoughts on Michael Thomas?
Now that he's not dealing with the high ankle sprain that kind of kept him in check last year, if you will, and missing a few games, I expect him to return to form, guys. Like, I expect Michael Thomas to be back inside the top 10 for wide receivers. Derek, I know that you have him rated even higher than just that, but I feel comfortable with that. We've seen that, and I'm tipping my hand here for later in the show. I apologize, but I believe that Jameis Winston can easily fulfill the Michael Thomas quota. He did it for a number of years with Mike Evans. It's not going to be a problem for him to do the same thing with Michael Thomas. Outside of Alvin Kamara, there's not really any sort of pass-catching threat in New Orleans. So he's an easy guy to lock onto. He runs crisp routes. He has great hands. So all these things where, Jameis can get a little wild at times. Michael Thomas and his just raw ability to catch the ball, his wingspan, and his ability to just come down with damn near everything keeps him up there. So I like him a lot. He's falling down draft boards. There's a lot of people who got pissed off. There you go. There's a lot of people who were pissed off about the fact that they drafted him in the first round and he finished at wide receiver 98. So it's kind of that scorned lover type deal. Go ahead and pass on him, man. He's a perfect candidate for picking up a wide receiver at the beginning of the 3rd round, middle of the 3rd round, to kind of depending on what you're doing. And you can be okay with that, guys. Like, I'll start a wide receiver core with Michael Thomas behind 2 running backs in the first 2 rounds. Like, I feel like that's just set up for success. He is definitely a guy that I have big stars next to. I am finding out where he's at on the draft board, and I'm keeping a very close eye on him because I think he's going to be outperforming his value immensely in 2021.
Yeah, if he comes, if we get to that, as Peng's Picks there says 140 targets mark, which is essentially what he had the 2018 and 2017 years, where he got 149 and 147 flip-flop that 149 and 17, 147 and 18. He still had over 100 catches, which is a pretty remarkable catch rate. Nevertheless, so I'd still say if he's at 140 targets, he's going to be over 1,000 yards, and that's obviously he's been over 1,000 yards every year except for last year with the ankle sprain. So yeah, if you're one of those spurned lovers, which if there's anyone who knows about being a spurned lover, it is myself. Then go ahead and pass on it, but it will be to your own detriment that you do that, because him healthy, even with which I think we all kind of hope it will be, for especially people who are picking up Michael Thomas, hope that it will be Jameis Winston that's throwing the football down there. Then you're going to be able to see his production get back to his form. Now, I don't think that he goes for 1,400 yards like he did in 2018. I definitely don't think he goes for 1,725 like he did in 2019. But even still, with 100 catches and say 12 or 1,300 yards, and if he can get in the end zone 7 or 8 times, you're going to be okay, especially with where he's being drafted at.
Yeah, you are absolutely correct there. And I'm going to just kind of call my shot on this one. He returns to form, wide receiver 1 this year, wide receiver number 1 overall. So when you look at it, he is being drafted as the wide receiver 9 right now. Kevin hit the mark kind of right on the head, where as far as ADP goes for round wise, he's 29.3 overall, which would put him a 3rd round, probably the 305, somewhere right in that range, 305 to 306, right in there. And if you can get a guy in that range that will be the, will finish in the number 1 wide receiver territory, you're going to be great. And hey, if you can get a wide receiver in that range that's going to finish in the top 3, you're still in great shape there. And I think that all of those are very real possibilities, even if Taysom Hill is the starting quarterback there, because with Taysom Hill under center last year, right? Like you look at some of the narrative street out there where Taysom Hill didn't necessarily like to throw the ball to Michael Thomas. When you look at it, he averaged about 8.8 targets per game with Taysom Hill under center there. So almost 9 targets a game, extrapolating that over 17, that puts it well above that 150 pace to it. But I think Jameis will be the starting quarterback there. So even better. So, we're kind of shoot all of our shots here when it comes to the starting quarterback down there. But and my Scott Fishbowl team really hopes that Jameis is the starting quarterback as well. So definitely rocking that one out there, but hoping that being the case. I think Michael Thomas will return to form here, definitely. And it's interesting that you put it at 1,400 yards there, Alex, because of the way that I had that statted out there. So that's the line here, over under 1,400 yards. What do you got for Michael Thomas this year?
I'm under.
I think I'm going to fall under, but barely. Like, I don't think it's going to be too far off. And I think that's just going to be the efficiency of the offense. I do think they're going to stutter a little bit, and I think that might slow some of that. But it's, 1386. Really something crazy like that, where it's going to be damn close.
I had, when I statted that out, it was 1,401, 1,401 yards for him. So I've got to take the over just barely based on how I'm projecting that one out there. But that was just very interesting that you set the line right there at 1,400, Alex.
I'm under, simply because if Jameis Winston is indeed the one who is under center, you have to understand that 20 to 25 of his passes intended for Michael Thomas will end up in the hands of the other team. That's going to happen.
I don't know
because
that's the case with
slants,
Sean Payton. Yeah, I don't know if that's the case with Payton, right? He's not throwing the deep balls that he was throwing to Mike Evans. So I'm not going to subscribe to that necessarily. But the one thing that I find cool about where these guys are going is this is one of the few natural stacks that you can gather in a draft. It's hard to stack the Chiefs offense. It is difficult to stack the Cowboys offense because they're going at opposite ends of different of the rounds, right? So if you get Zeke, typically it's not falling back to you where you can get CD or Amari because they're going so damn close. But where Mike Evans, excuse me, that was a couple years ago with Jameis, where Michael Thomas is going at the 305, well, hell, the 105, that's Kamara Central right there. You can pick you can stack Hardman, Pringle, and Robinson. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, you sure could. I don't know that you'd want to, but Peng's picks, you're right, you could.
That sounds like the world's worst injury law firm right there. Here at Hardman, Pringle, and Robinson, we fight for your rights. Sorry, go ahead.
No, but, at the 105, that's prime Kamara territory. Based off of ADP, based off of where we have him ranked, all that type of thing. And then flipping back around at the top of the third, like, you're salivating at this. Like, I have zero qualms about starting a team with Kamara, player X, and Michael Thomas. Like, whatever that kind of falls back to. And it could be Austin Eckler, something like that. And going through, and then you have 2 pass-catching running backs and the ultimate pass-catching wide receiver. So I like it. I like it a lot. I generally don't love picking at that 5 to 8 spot starting a draft. This year seems to be flowing a bit different. Like I can feel really, really good about the team I draft picking 5, 6, 7, or 8, where most years I dread it. I just don't love it that much. This year, not so much. First 6 rounds, chalk it up. Like I will absolutely take those to the bank all year long.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually interesting because, you're talking stacks with the Saints players and all that. That was one of the questions I posted over there on the Sports Me, kind of leading up today is you give me your spicy take on the Saints. And it was amazing how many folks are just kind of out on New Orleans this year because of the quarterback situation. And for the most part, the general take was it didn't matter who was starting, whether it was Jameis or Taysom. And that is something that I'll tell you, I don't subscribe to that at all. These guys will be valuable for fantasy. They will be relevant for fantasy. And if you're passing on some of these guys just because you're thinking that that quarterback situation isn't going to necessarily be great, you are going to be missing out, and you're going to be giving some of the league mates in your league some advantages there. So there are lots of really good options here, and we're going to keep going through some of them. Tre'Quan Smith is a guy that, I think this is, is this the year that he finally breaks out? That was kind of the thing last year. Everybody was thinking maybe this is the year that he breaks out, and didn't really happen. But now kind of having to fill in for that wide receiver 2 spot over there. We'll see what happens. 34 receptions last year, 50 targets, 448 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Guys, your thoughts on Tre'Quan Smith?
I wanted to be
before you go, Kevin. Yeah, before you go, the reason that you're going to get we're about to go through reasons 1 and 1A of why it's going to be a little bit of a struggle for the Saints offense and Michael Thomas this year, because we're talking about the 2 guys that'll be on the opposite side of the field for him. Now, I understand that Alvin Kamara is a pass catching running back and that he will be a threat, and that defenses are going to have to honor wherever 41 is on the field. And that's going to take some attention away from Michael Thomas. But we are about to go over reasons 1 and 1A why it is going to be a struggle, because they don't have, again, the smartest player on the field when he's on the field anymore in Drew Brees.
Yes. Tre'Quan kept getting chance after chance. Drew Brees really liked him. And I think that's part of why Sean Payton has kind of continued to buy into him is, yeah, they were cash strapped, right? That's why they had to let Manny Sanders go, and now he's in Buffalo, and they had some other needs. It's probably why they didn't draft a guy early. I don't love him. I really don't. Like I jumped on that bandwagon last year thinking that, okay, this was going to be it. Like he had to develop through his rookie season, and now he's familiar with Peyton's offense, and Drew Brees is going to be there. And then Michael Thomas went down, thinking, okay, like this is it. Like this guy's going to step up, and he's at least going to be fantasy relevant. Not necessarily wide receiver 1 territory, but at least be fantasy relevant. And boy, oh boy, was I wrong. Like this isn't a guy that I'm looking at. Like I'd rather take my chance on some young, and not that he's in his 3rd year, so it's not that he's not young, but some rookie that you don't know as much about. I'd rather wait and take one of the Colts receivers that are going late right now. And any of the 3, I'd take any one of them. I'd take Denzel Mims over him. And it's just Tim Patrick. I think I would take Tim Patrick over Tre'Quan Smith. Like, and it's not a huge knock on Tre'Quan necessarily, but at the same time, how many chances do you need to get? You have one of the best quarterbacks ever throwing you the ball, giving you all the tutelage in the world that you could ever ask for in film study and on the practice field. You have Michael Thomas leading the way in the weight room and how to do things as a perennial all-pro wide receiver, and you can't get your head out of your ass to be able to catch 60 balls. Like, I'm just not buying into it. I'm not a fan of him. I don't want any part of him. I will look a lot of other places before I settle on Tre'Quan Smith and feel good going, Yep. He's the number 2 receiver on Team X that I want to get. Like, pass. There's at least 18 other teams right now, without even really thinking about it, that I'd rather have their number 2 wide receiver instead of Tre'Quan Smith.
Yeah, I think with the depth of talent at wide receiver and just league wide, really, that if you can't be a proven commodity, then you'd rather go with the unproven commodity in a rookie or, a guy who's coming off of a rookie year, more so than a Tre'Quan Smith, because Kevin, to your point, it's not there. And, for whatever reason, it's not there. And for that, you're better off just looking in a different direction.
See, I'll offer in a little different viewpoint on this one. I do think that Tre'Quan Smith does have some fantasy relevance and some fantasy value on that one this year. Looking at it, I've got him at, he's going to see a fair amount of targets down there because, quite frankly, New Orleans is going to throw the ball. They're probably going to throw the ball close to 600 times with that extra game on it this year. Even with us projecting them having a little bit more running game and that kind of stuff, they're still going to throw the ball between 550 and 600 attempts on that one. You can only throw the ball so many times to Michael Thomas. You can only throw the ball so many times to Alvin Kamara, which then leads into who is that second pass catching or third pass catching option on that one. And it comes down to either, being Adam Trautman or Tre'Quan Smith on that one. And both of those guys, I think, are going to see well over 100 targets on this one. And so the fact that he's going to see over 100 targets on that, because they've got to throw the ball to somebody down there, he's going to have a fantasy relevant season on this one. And where he's being drafted at, he could be a value for you because he's going in almost round 23. There's, very few drafts out there that go that deep. Our home league is one of those types of drafts that will go into 22, 23 type of rounds. But for the most part, he's going as undrafted. So if you're getting into that last pick on that thing, he could be worth a dart throw on that one, because and part of the reason I say that is even if you're taking him with that last pick in your draft, he probably is going to have some fantasy relevance, but B, what that role is going to look like in week 1, week 2 type of thing. And if it's not there, he's cuttable, and you're able to pick up somebody else on the waiver wire and move on that point as well. Kevin, you look like you got a thought for me.
No, there's nothing wrong with subscribing to a dart throw at the last pick of your draft. That's a perfectly good reason.
Fair enough. All righty. Well, let's go ahead and move on over to the tight end. And Adam Trautman last year, he was playing behind Jared Cook. He was the backup role, 15 receptions on 16 targets, 171 yards, and 1 touchdown. Guys, your thoughts on Adam Trautman?
Adam Trautman is one of those sneaky tight ends, right? That everybody's starting to kind of fall in love with. They're starting to see, starting to think about him kind of late if you're waiting on tight ends. He's also a tight end that's starting to creep up the draft boards. And I think by the time the middle of August hits, when draft season gets really hot and heavy, we're going to see him going a lot higher than what he's currently going. I wouldn't be surprised to see him go off the board at like tight end 13 when it's all said and done with, and kind of get in the mix with kind of some of the mix of sloppies that no one really wants, right? The Evan Ingram, the Anthony Firkser, Adam Trautman, hell, even Evan Ingram, because people are really down on him this year too. But they, like you said, Derek, they got to throw the ball to someone. Jared Cook left. He's in L.A. with the Chargers right now, so there's got to be targets to go around. They brought in Nick Vanette, who is a pass blocking tight end. He is not a pass catching tight end, so that doesn't worry me at all. And someone has to emerge, and Trautman has the ability to kind of play off the line and still be productive. I say this only because it's a Saints reference, but he's kind of like a poor man Jimmy Graham. He's not as athletic, but he can line up off the line in the slot and do a couple different things like Jimmy Graham did for him. So I like him late, especially if I'm waiting on tight end, 2 tight end league. I like him because I can take one kind of early and then wait a while, fill up my skill positions, then come back to him later on. So I like him for a lot of different reasons in that perspective, but I'm probably not going to trot him out as my starting tight end week 1. I'm probably going to find something I'm a little bit more comfortable with as a floor, and I'm going to make Sean Payton and the quarterback for the Saints show me how he's going to be utilized in this offense before I roll him out every week and say, okay, this is a guy I can lean on for a couple weeks.
Yeah, there are just too many question marks surrounding usage. I like his efficiency, 15 on 16. That's not bad. If he could keep that number up and increase those 2 numbers, that would be nice. We all know that it's not going to happen, but I think it's just with tight end, and you guys know my thoughts on tight end. You know, I fall in love with a guy, and then I'm gonna get him wherever I want to get him at, probably 2 or 3 rounds too early. But that's my philosophy on tight ends. And so for Adam Trautman, I just don't know that he's a guy that I would be targeting. But to your point there, Kevin, that this is one of those trendy names, and it's trending in a direction that is probably going to force me to have to not even consider him. So I like your philosophy on it, Kevin, in that he's got to prove it. You've got to figure out what they're doing with the offense down there, who's throwing the football, and how much he's going to be utilized. But right out of the gate, probably not a guy that I'm looking too hard at.
See, Adam Trautman for me is the guy that I saw being my Jonnu Smith from last year, this year, right? The guy that you were able to pick up very late in the draft and had that sneaky upside to come in and put up some very good weekly performances for you, and didn't just kind of stream the position as you were going through. But Kevin, I think you're right. I think by the time that we actually get fully into redraft season, he's going to, creep up to the boards to the point where it's not going to be a desirable pick anymore, because you're going to probably have to start spending 10th round capital on that. And where I like drafting my tight end is going to be in that 12th, 13th, 14th round, more in that range. And forever, that's where his draft capital has been, where he was the 29th tight end off the board. 225 was his average draft position. So in that guy that was going almost undraftable in most drafts, I don't know that that'll continue to be the case, because I think you're right. I think he'll sneak up there in about that 10th round when it's all said and done. But if you can get him 12th, 13th round, absolutely worth the dart throw on that one, because I think you will be pleasantly surprised on what you can get out of Adam Trautman this year.
Yeah. So according to Fantasy Football Calculator, his overall draft rank is all the way up to 156 now, which puts him at basically the 13-12 spot. So him, Irv Smith, Jonnu Smith, and Gerald Everett are all kind of going around that same range. So I do expect that to climb up. I expect him to be going above, like you said, Derek, probably in the 11th or 12th or 11th or even 10th round, right? See him go up where above Tyler Higbee, maybe by up by Gronk at the end of the 10th round, maybe slide above Evan Ingram or Robert Tonyan, kind of in that area. And the appeal is there, but I just can't subscribe to to spending that high of a capital on a guy where I'm just going to end up streaming that position for the most part anyway, right? If you don't have one of the top four guys, you should be streaming the position because it's a week-to-week proposition, right? You never know when Logan Thomas or Robert Tonyan are going to come along that you can pick off the waiver wire and ride them to a top 5 tight end finish. So could Trautman be that guy? Absolutely. There's nothing saying that he can't, but you're going to be streaming it to find it. So I wouldn't spend, maybe I'm going to phrase it that way. I wouldn't spend a 10th or 11th round pick on a guy that I'm going to drop to pick up the next best thing 4 weeks into the season. Like, I still want my 10th round pick to be something that I can fundamentally use on my roster. And whether it's for bye weeks, whether it's for proper depth, maybe it's kind of an early stage of a handcuff, depending on how that looks. Like, there's a lot of different things I could go there that doesn't scream streamer tight end in the 10th round.
Right. And Clock Management chiming in that he got him in a draft super late recently. Very good for you. Love the guys over there at Clock Management. Had them on the show before. They do some great things. Check them out. Like I said, that's a guy that I was really hoping to be able just to get late and stream and play that round. But ifs and buts and candies and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas, right? So let's go ahead and we'll.
Is that how that saying goes?
Yep. It is how it goes, but it just shows how old Derek is because no one says it anymore.
You're a curmudgeon.
Well, I just want to point out that both of you are also old because you knew exactly the phrasing with it and the saying.
I had to double check. I knew about the first part. I didn't know about that. Then we'd all have a Merry Christmas. Likely story.
So, alrighty, guys, let's go ahead and move on over to the quarterback room. And according to the Saints, there's a QB battle that's going to be taking place, camp battle going on here. I don't know that I subscribe to that. The guy on the screen is who I'm going to say is the starting quarterback when the season rolls out. That's how I statted and projected it. But last year, he was a backup, played a very backup role. The stats are, just kind of throw him out the window because you had 11 attempts, right? He had about as many attempts last year as, Taysom Hill had going into last year over Taysom Hill's entire career. So what are your thoughts on Jameis Winston?
I still like Jameis. Jameis is like the younger version of Ryan Fitzpatrick. Like, he always makes fantasy football interesting. And sometimes it's for the good, right? And you're riding high because he throws for 350 yards and 4 or 5.
We made it through like an entire hour before we lost Kevin this time around.
It was touch and go there for a second, a few times I thought, but
I thought we were going to make it.
I thought we were too.
I was holding my breath, trying not to create any disturbances on the old Wi-Fi's here, but we've got him back.
I got so close.
You cut out saying that he was going to throw for 350 and then you were gone.
Oh, well, the fuck kind of summed up the drop.
Sure did.
I was 4 or 5 touchdowns, and on other weeks, right, he's going to throw for maybe 0, maybe 1 touchdown, 176 yards and 3 picks. And you're going to be scratching your head going, well, crap, he just cost me my week. So he makes it interesting. He's the best quarterback the Saints have. Like, I know Sean Payton likes his little gimmicky Taysom Hill, and throwing him in the red zone and mixing him in is one thing. But, we saw Taysom Hill last year, right? Jameis Winston didn't get to play when Drew Brees was out. They decided to put Taysom Hill in, and we saw the inefficiencies of Taysom Hill. Go back to the Denver Broncos and New Orleans Saints football game last year and tell me that Taysom Hill is a starting quarterback in this league. I mean,
that tape needs to be burned.
It does.
Forever.
It does. The game tape's
Brutal.
terrible. Taysom Hill barely outperformed a wide receiver playing quarterback. Like, barely. It was just
a practice squad wide receiver playing quarterback.
Yeah. So I think Jameis is the guy. I think he leads them to the highest ceiling. He does create a little bit more risk than Taysom does, but in that division, you have to go against Tom Brady and the defending Super Bowl champions twice. The Falcons, while their defense is soft, still has a high-flying offense, and the Falcons-Saints games are still must-see TV. Like, those games are just really, really fun to watch. And Carolina's no slouch. Darnold's coming in. Their receiving core is young and dynamic. Their defense is slightly improved, getting Jace Horn there in the first round to kind of bolster that secondary and compete with these big wide receiver targets. So you have to put up points in the NFC South to win. You absolutely have to. And you're not going to be able to put up the points needed to get into the playoffs if Taysom Hill is your quarterback, because in that division, you are not going to win games 17-10. You have to win games 28-24, 35-28, that type of thing, week in and week out. Otherwise, you're third, fourth on the depth chart in that division, and you're looking up at the playoffs instead of being able to say, hey, we made it in. Now let's see what happens and what the matchup brings us.
Okay, I think I'll say this. I think that Jameis Winston gives the best value for fantasy for the other players on the team. I think that Jameis Winston is the best quarterback for everybody else on the team. But I don't know that Jameis Winston is the best quarterback on the team right now.
How dare you?
I say that because the two guys that we're not going to talk about have some intrigue. One of them is whatever. But the third quarterback that is on their depth chart right now is a little intriguing to me. So I think that with the way that the Saints, however this plays out, however this shakes out, whoever's the week 1 starter, I do think that they get a fair shake and they get the chance to show what they've got. But I think that the leash is short, and I think the leash is short for all of them down there. So I know that Kevin, you're much higher on Jameis Winston than both Derek and I, because I just went and looked at our rankings. You had Jameis up at 16. Derek and I both had him at 25. So we're both a little bit further down than you are. And I could totally easily see Jameis Winston come in at QB 16. Like that's not out of the realm of possibility. I'm more leaning towards the fact that I don't know that he gets to play an entire season, because I think the frustration level will be too high. Nobody wants to be the guy replacing the guy, right? Ask Jay Cutler, or ask Brian Greasy. Nobody wants to be the guy who replaces the guy, and it's going to be tough. It's going to be a struggle down there.
But what we don't know is what Jameis learned in his season of humbling, right?
Sure.
We're not quite sure, because the way that the media portrayed it, right? And I say the media meaning whoever was televising the game, CBS, Fox, NBC, ESPN, whoever. He always had his headset on. He was always talking to Drew Brees over at the sideline. Like, he was always, in Sean Payton's ear, listening to the play calls and being like, it sure seemed like he was doing the right things, right? That getting released from Tampa Bay was kind of that wake-up call. And he's been able to keep out of the news as far as kind of that boneheaded young kid stuff that he had at Florida State, and even kind of the first part when he was in Tampa. So that's what I'm subscribing to, right? Like, I'm going to subscribe to the positive here because of what I was able to see. Now, I didn't see the film study. I didn't see inside the locker room and how he acted with the staff and with the players. But what I did see was a guy that really at least seemed to give a damn. And he already has more raw talent than anybody else in that room. So if he's going to care, I'm going to take that as success for the Saints, which leads to fantasy success for all of us.
Very true. And so when you look at it too, right, like you're talking about a guy that's, there's he obviously had that humbling moment when it came into getting released and going through that. But then you saw the guy come in right after you, and the roster wasn't that different from 2019 to 2020 as far as the Bucs were concerned. They made a big change at quarterback, but that defense was still very similar. You saw a lot of those offensive pieces be very similar to 2019, and they go out and win a Super Bowl on that one. So, you talk about further humbling of a guy. Nothing really does that more so than a guy coming in and winning with your team and taking them all the way to a Super Bowl on that one. You also look at the fact too that Jameis has had a few things out there from the laser eye surgery. He's saying that he can see better than he's ever been able to see before. And you saw some of that too when they were going through some of that. You didn't see him doing the same thing where he's squinting and trying to see what's going on either in the playbook or, on the sideline watching the film or watching the game play out and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think that a lot of things have transpired there. And I think that you probably have seen, the young man mature a little bit. And I think he's ready to take this team, and I think he's probably more the fit for Sean Payton's offense. He's got the big arm. He's got the willingness to throw the ball down the field that I don't know that we necessarily see out of Taysom Hill. So while I might have been a little bit down on him, it was just a matter as far as how the statting out of everything works. But I think he will be week 1 starter, and I think that you'll see him hold the job the entire year with them bringing Taysom Hill in as kind of that wildcat sprinkle and some of that goal line type of stuff, just like they did with Drew Brees. That's how I see Taysom Hill playing this thing out.
Interesting. That takes away the question I was going to pose to the group, which was number of starts for Jameis Winston. And I was going to put the number at probably way too low for either of you, but I'll go with a more probably appropriate one, 12.5.
Over.
Yeah, over. 16 is what I see. They will be in the playoffs. They won't have to worry about week 17, and so they'll trot Taysom Hill out there.
Okay. Can I put money on this?
So
over 12.5. I'll put money on.
No. That they'll be in the playoffs and they'll trot Taysom Hill out in week 18.
Yeah. Well, we can talk off air on that one.
Yeah, we need
that
to.
one out. So,
I'll start working on it and set odds.
So, alrighty, guys. Well, any other thoughts on Jameis? Alrighty, let's go ahead and move on over to Taysom Hill. And Taysom Hill, came in for some relief work with the Drew Brees injury. 88 completions, 121 attempts, 928 yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Put up 87 rushing attempts, 457 yards, 8 touchdowns. Your thoughts on Taysom Hill?
He did this over, starting 5.5 games, right? For the injured Drew Brees. I just don't like him. He's a nice piece to it, right? He can add a different layer to the offense. He keeps the defense honest with being able to put them all over the place on the field. He keeps the special teams honest if Sean Payton keeps them on special teams, running down and cracking some of that. So it's not that this kid doesn't have the want to. This Taysom Hill has probably a greater desire to play football than the vast majority of current NFL players. So when I'm saying this, it's not taking away his want to or desire to play football. His raw natural ability is just not there when you're comparing him to players who play the same position. He's not a tight end. He's a quarterback now. And he is not in the same realm of quarterback as 95% of the league. Like, yes, he takes off and runs, but every time he runs, what does that do? It gets, 5 to 7 yards, and sure, he falls down, but at some point your quarterback's going to get hurt, right? We see this time and time again. Look at Dak Prescott, right? So if you really want Taysom Hill to be your quarterback, do you want him continuing to take those chances time and time again? Are you going to let him get plowed over by 300-pound linemen in the red zone? Or are you going to make him step back and be a pocket passer to some extent? Not completely, but to some extent. And if that's the case, I'm not trusting him. Again, go back to the Bronco game. He averaged less than 200 yards passing per start. Like, that in Denver, we got more production than that. We got more production out of Drew Lock throwing the football than what the Saints got out of Taysom Hill. Like, I just will not subscribe to the fact that this guy is anything more than a layer to the offense. He is not who the offense will run through.
So the reason why I had the over-under at 12.5, which really I thought more realistic would be 9.5 starts for Jameis Winston. Yeah, I know, is for this reason. The reason that you kept bringing up all the time, talking about all the rest of the players on the Saints offense, and that is that Sean Payton is still there as the offensive mastermind. And Sean Payton has done everything in his power to put Taysom Hill in a position that he would be a starting quarterback in this league. I think that Sean Payton, this will be the demise of Sean Payton, is Taysom Hill, because I think that he's going to try to force this into being something that it absolutely is not. So I see Taysom Hill getting probably much more run at quarterback than he should this upcoming season. And that's where I think that, that's where I kind of pump the brakes on a Jameis Winston, because I do think that Taysom Hill gets a much longer leash than a Jameis Winston would. And I also think that Ian Book or Trevor Siemian probably has a longer leash than a Jameis Winston would in this offense. I just with Sean Payton still there and the love affair that he has with Taysom Hill, because I think that's what he, to your point, Kevin, the kid loves to play football. He is, that gadget player that I think these coaches, they see all of the possibilities of what the gadget player could be without realizing what the gadget player is. And so I think that they have the giant blind spot of what the gadget player is versus everything that the gadget player could be. And that blind spot is it's a demise to what they can accomplish, right? It just does not work. We saw it with Tim Tebow, right? And I'm not saying that Taysom Hill is Tim Tebow, but I'm kind of saying that Taysom Hill is Tim Tebow. It just does not make any sense. It is, but it just does not make any sense why Sean Payton continues to try to force Taysom Hill to be a quarterback in this league, because they want him on the field making plays. And the only person who touches the ball more than the quarterback is the center. And he wants the ball in Taysom Hill's hands. I would not be surprised if Taysom Hill is the starter week 1. I would not be surprised if he's got a longer leash than many would expect him to have.
Okay, so here are kind of my thoughts on the Taysom Hill side of things. When you look at the games he started, which were weeks 11, 12, 13, and 14, as far as that goes, he played some of the worst defenses in the league. The best defense that he played was Philadelphia, who was ranked 16th against the quarterbacks in fantasy points given up. So they were actually in the top. They were right at the halfway mark every other team was worse in the bottom half of points given up against the quarterback. He played Atlanta twice, who was second worst in the league last year, 31 out of 32 teams against the quarterback in giving up points, in which case he put up good points, but that was because he ran the ball a ton. Didn't necessarily throw the ball, threw the ball, but it was short little dump off type of routes to it. Barely got over 200 yards in both of those games. And it just like, you're talking about Sean Payton and being this offensive mastermind and what he can do and all of that. I don't believe that that's what Sean Payton wants to see week in and week out, is these constant just 200-yard games out of his quarterback with 80 yards having come on the ground from his quarterback. He's got other pieces around him to do that, such as Alvin Kamara, who is a great playmaker, Latavius Murray, who's a great playmaker as well and can pick up those rushing yards as well as the fact that they've got probably one of the very best wide receivers in the league. I just don't see it happening where Taysom Hill is going to be able to run this offense the way that Sean Payton envisions it running, especially after coming off of a guy like Drew Brees and not pushing the ball down the field and not pushing the ball really at all.
And that begs the question, why was he the backup? Why was he the guy who started last year when Drew was out? That is the question that you have to ask.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Kevin.
Jameis wasn't hurt.
No, Taysom's just safe. The Saints had made their mark and had their record set. They weren't trying to win games. They were trying to keep the ship afloat. And that's what Taysom allows you to do, right? He allows you to keep the ship afloat. He doesn't make mistakes because he's completely risk adverse. If he doesn't like it, he's going to go scamper for 3 yards and live to fight another day. Like in the middle of the season, when you're sitting at 9-2, going into that game, like, yeah, you can coast into the playoffs and just don't F it up. But starting at 0-0 and looking at their schedule, guys, like they have to be able to start strong. Like the back end's a little bit more favorable, but the start of their season is difficult. Like they open the season at home against Green Bay. So they get that game at home, but at this point, I'm assuming Aaron Rodgers is coming back to the Packers until I'm told he's not. So Taysom Hill's not beating Aaron Rodgers. I don't care what happens in that game. Taysom Hill's not going to do it. At least Jameis could try and air it out and try and beat him. Yeah, he might end up with 4 picks because they're late fourth quarter interceptions, but Taysom's not going to be able to throw him into that game. That's Jameis Winston. You have to do that. And then you're at Carolina. Taysom could probably win that game. Like, okay, fine. So you're sitting at 1-1, then New England. You're at New England. Bill Belichick is not going to stand for Taysom Hill walking in there and beating him. Like, that's not going to freaking happen.
He's got the perfect player on the other side. He's got the perfect player as his starting quarterback to practice against, in Cam Newton.
Yeah. So the Giants, I think that's a 50-50 toss. That Giants defense was very good last year. They were sneaky good, and they got better. So, and then they're at Washington. Washington posted a top 3 defense, guys. Then they're at Seattle, then Tampa Bay. That's their first 7 games. Taysom, you're going to go 2-5 with Taysom Hill under center. If you trot him out to start the season and you give him that long leash, you're 2-5, and there's no chance of you making the playoffs at that point. That's just not going to happen in the NFC.
Yeah, I'm fully agreeing with that thought there as well. I just don't see it happening there. And when you look at it too, the Saints defense didn't necessarily get better this year. They were an elite unit last year, but this year, I think they're going to take a step backwards as far as the defensive side of the ball goes. So you're going to have to play a little bit more offensive side of things. And I think Jameis does that for you far more than what Taysom does. Any final thoughts on Taysom Hill and or the Saints? All righty. Well, guys, we've been working on those rankings like we've been talking about. And like we said, we're going to bring you the tight end rankings this week. And here they are. So starting off, we've got Kelsey, Kittle, Waller, Andrews, Hawkinson, Pitts, Goddard, and Fant, kind of the top 8. So guys, what are some of your thoughts here on this top 8 ranking?
I don't feel like any of this is a big surprise, and not that it's just the general industry consensus, but people have big expectations for Kyle Pitts. Hawkinson's kind of the only show in town for Detroit, so I mean, you could argue him sliding up into that fourth spot just by sheer volume that he's going to see from Jared Goff. Dallas Goedert might be the one wild card, right? Like, how much does Jalen Hurts use Dallas Goedert? I know Carson Wentz leaned on their tight end with Zach Ertz quite regularly. But I'm not sure if Jalen Hurts is going to do the same thing, or instead of dumping it to the tight end, is he going to peel out and run a little bit more? Because that wasn't necessarily Carson's forte after the knee injury. So that's the one wild card, right? Fance right there. That makes sense. A key piece of that Denver offense. So overall, the top 8, I think it looks good. I can't really argue with a guy taking any one of those guys in that position, but I don't know, man. I still like more bang for my buck later in the draft.
Right. And there was this wasn't necessarily unanimous when we went through this deal. You guys both had Kittle number 2. I had Kittle as my 3rd, with Waller scooting up there into that 2nd spot for me. So a little bit of difference there. One of the other ones that we were a little bit different on, I had Fant as my 13. You guys both had him as up there at 8. Dallas Goedert was another one that we kind of were a little bit varied on, with ranks of 9, 6, and 8. So definitely some different kind of mixes up there, and just kind of curious. I guess let me ask the question this way. So when I had Waller at 2, simply based on target volume there, and you guys had Kittle at 3. So sell me on Kittle being ahead of Waller on this one.
I think Kittle has the opportunity to not just, first off, it's Jimmy G, right? We're under the assumption that it's going to be Jimmy G throwing the football, right? So take the safest option. I think that's what Jimmy G wakes up in the morning and sees on his bedroom wall as he gets out of bed, is take the safest option. That's George Kittle. And so that's where I think, but Kittle also has the ability, I think, to rip off some big games and some long catches that'll get you extra bonus points versus Waller's. I think Waller's a little, this is splitting hairs here, but Waller's a little more touchdown dependent versus yard dependent that Kittle can provide. That's the difference for me.
Okay.
Waller goes big every time he plays against me. I'll tell you that much from
He sure
experience.
Does. He sure does.
I got smoked.
Find out whenever Waller's going up, whenever Kevin's going up against Darren Waller, and get that man in your starting lineup.
Yeah, play him in DFS, because that's weak winners there.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
No doubt. I think for me, it's splitting hairs, right? It's almost dealer's choice, going all the way back to the beginning of the show, right? When we were talking about running backs and, the draft position of, well, where does Kamara go? Does he go 3, 4, 5, or 6, right? Somewhere in that neighborhood. I don't know that there's necessarily a right or a wrong answer. Waller's a little bit older, but he doesn't have the injury history. They're both the number 1 targets in those offenses. The one thing, the one thing about the Raiders are I think the Raiders are going to try and spread the ball out a bit more. Like, they spent first round draft capital on Henry Ruggs. They know what they have in Hunter Renfrow. They have now 2 running backs in that system between Kenyon Drake and Josh Jacobs. And Derek Carr is another guy who's fairly risk adverse. Like, he doesn't turn the ball over a whole lot. He's not taking huge shots down the field, but I think he's been working on that too. So I can see it either way. I will tell you that the one downside with George Kittle is in the last 6 or 7 seasons, and I'll have to go back and double check this, but no pass catcher for the San Francisco 49ers has finished with more than 6 touchdowns.
Right.
Like
Kittle's high is 5 on a season.
Right. So that could be it. But if he's seeing 130 targets or more at the tight end position, I mean, that's just hard to turn down. I don't know that Waller's going to see quite that many. I think the Raiders are going to try and spread it out a little bit more, where Jimmy G will have no problem in focusing only in on Kittle if he has to.
Fair enough. Alrighty, guys. Well, let's go
Hold
ahead.
on, before we get out of this top 8, I think the real wild card in this one is Kyle Pitts. Like we all know that Kyle Pitts is like a dude, right? Like we were all pretty sold on the fact that this kid was gonna be whoever took him, like that was the right choice for that team. Like whoever took him in the draft this year, that was the right choice, was to get Kyle Pitts on your team. But here's the thing, he's going to that Atlanta team, and that Atlanta team, they need some help, right? They needed help in a lot of different areas. And I wasn't sure that tight end was exactly one of them. But with the departure of Julio, that does free up some targets for Kyle Pitts, but just exactly what the kid's going to be, I think is going to be intriguing. And I think right now, this could go like awesome for him, where he could be, flirting with Kelsey as like tight end 1, or it could just be a horrific experiment and he could be way outside of the top, outside of tight end 2 territory. I feel a little more comfortable saying that it's probably closer to him flirting with tight end 1 than the other end of that. But you want to talk about a wild card. I think Pitts is the wild card in this one. And I think people might be overspending on him just because he is a rookie. But all that being said, like I'd be all in on him too.
So let me ask y'all a question. Do you think that Kyle Pitts does better than 64 receptions, 115 targets for 722 yards and 6 touchdowns?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. The reason that those numbers were so specific is that is actually the rookie record for the best season for a rookie tight end, and that was Evan Ingram's numbers back in 2017, where he finishes the tight end number 5 on the season there. I think that Kyle Pitts will also do better than that as well. I think Julio leaving town definitely kind of cements that in my mind a little bit more so than if Julio was still there. But just kind of an interesting thought to think about, that the best rookie tight end that we've ever seen from a season come through, finished at 9 with 6 touchdowns and about 722 yards. So very interesting to see how that one comes to play. And I think, from what that list looks like, you're going to see a lot of guys flirting with, probably 800-900 yards ahead of him, with those 4 or 5 guys there. And so it will be very interesting to see how he finishes. And I think Alex is pretty spot on there, that it's either going to be boom or bust, as far as expectations around him go. So let's go ahead and hit up numbers. And it says 16 on there, but the sheet just wouldn't let me rank 14, 14, and 14. That's why you see 3 guys down there, because Logan Thomas, Gronk, and Hunter Henry all finished at 14. But number 9 was Robert Tonyan. Number 10 was Irv Smith Jr. Number 11, Evan Ingram. Number 12, Jonnu Smith. Number 13, Mike Gesicki. 14 was Logan Thomas. A tie for 14 was Gronk, and a tie for 14 was Hunter Henry. 3-way tie, which doesn't happen much when you're talking consensus rankings between the 3 of us. So, guys, your thoughts on kind of this tight end 2 territory?
I could see Irv Smith Jr. I know top 10 is still decent, but I could see Irv Smith Jr. creeping his way up in there with Kyle Rudolph gone, with the Kirk Cousins still. You want to talk about a guy that wakes up every morning and says take the safest option, and with what that team they're going to try to be, I think with what they're going to try to get back to, I think Irv Smith, he has sneaky touchdown upside. Maybe not so much yardage wise because you do have Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen still, but Irv Smith Jr. has proven to be a pretty good threat inside the 20, particularly inside the 10. So I could see him sneaking up and not being at 10 and finishing higher than that. Beyond that, I mean, it's just you're flipping a coin with tight ends outside of the top 5 or 6.
Yeah, I'm okay with this, right? Like, I think the thing that's holding Tanyan back is his usage, right? His target share was not that great in Green Bay. He just did the most with what he could.
A lot of touchdowns.
Yeah, and I think Logan Thomas is going to kind of fall back down to reality as far as probably where he should be ranked there in that, top end of tight end 2 territory. But realistically, I think you could see this whole row 9 through 16 finish in any one of those spots, and it wouldn't surprise anybody, right? Like Tanya could finish as 16, and Irv Smith Jr. could be 15, and Gesicki could be all the way up at 9, and no one would be shocked by any of this. Like, these guys are all, while have different skill sets, I think all are going to be within like very minimal points within each other. So it's roster construction, what you feel comfortable with, doing your research within the offenses. If you miss out on Devontae Adams and you want a piece of the Green Bay offense because Aaron Rodgers is coming back, Tanyan's not a bad option. But then again, I'd take Tanyan and either draft a second tight end or just expect to be streaming a little bit. Like, this whole list, right, outside of the top 8, right? I'm looking at this top 8 going, would I stream them or would I kind of keep them around? And I think I'd kind of keep all these guys around for a bit longer. Goddard may be my one exception, but that's just my personal take. Outside of that, I'm looking over at 9 through 16 going, I could drop him. I could pick him up. I could drop him again. Like, it's no big deal. Everyone hates Evan Ingram right now. Like, honestly, he's the guy I'm kind of eyeballing because I still think he has top 5 talent. Like, I do. He had a couple drops last year. Everyone kind of, jumped down his throat about it, but he played a full season. So that was a plus. His usage was there at times, but the Giants didn't have anybody else to catch the damn ball for a large part of last year. No Saquon. Sterling Shepard was in and out with concussion protocol. Darius Slayton had to go up against the top corner against every team now because of how he did in 2019 to finish the season. So Evan Ingram was kind of the only show in town. And if the Giants can do a better job of letting him run up the seam and create problems for safeties instead of just running these option routes where maybe he's on the wrong page as Daniel Jones, which is creating some of the drops and frustration, like, you could see Ingram climb up this board and end up inside the top 8, and I'd be perfectly happy with that.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at as well. When you're looking at the 9 through 16 list, I'm looking to see which one of those guys is going the latest in the draft, and that's who I'm gonna be targeting there. Again, right there in that 12, 13, 14 type of round there, because with the tight ends, if you're not getting really one of these top 3 guys, it's better just to wait on the position. There's so much more value you can get at what those ADPs of those other guys are going to be that I'm just going to wait on that one. But awesome. Well, guys, any other thoughts on either some tight end rankings, the Saints, or thoughts in general?
No, do your homework, right? I mean, look into this, get different opinions. This is how we see it. We sure like to be right. It's our goal to be right, but there's no guarantees. So do your homework, have some fun. We're getting closer and closer to draft season. The news has been a little bit slow, and probably will be here for the next couple weeks. But teams are going to start hitting camp here pretty soon, and then the real fun's going to start, and that's when things kind of get crazy. So, do your research, keep your ear to the ground, keep a little notebook, right? If you hear a name and you keep hearing this beat writer or someone keep talking about them, jot a name down, go do your own, research, and maybe you can find that diamond in the rough that all of us are missing, and be able to ride them to a fantasy championship.
Absolutely. Alex, any final thoughts?
I got to start drafting more.
Yes, you do.
My final thought.
Yes, you do.
When in
We'll get
doubt,
there.
draft best ball teams, because then you're
Yep.
not managing rosters, right? That's the beauty
Yeah.
of best ball, is you can kind of treat those in a bunch of different ways. You hop on, and whether it's a free entry or just a $5 entry to kind of try some different things out, either way, you're not out a bunch of cash. But best ball is a beautiful way to just draft, and you don't have any of the commitments during the regular season. After it's over, you just call it good and see how the chips fall.
Yep. That's one of my favorite things to do, is doing I actually figured it out last year. I played in more best ball leagues than I did in dynasty, redraft, and any other format combined. Just because you're able to hop on, you're able to do a couple of quick drafts there and move on there without necessarily all the time commitment during the season, but definitely get you prepared for the redraft coming up. And that's one of my biggest tips. If anybody asks, hey, how do I get ready to do that? I always tell them to draft best ball, not necessarily to do a bunch of mock drafts, because you'll see people do a lot more crazy things a lot of times in mock drafts. But in best ball, you'll see them draft a little bit more true to form and what you'll see happen in actual redraft leagues there. So that's always my my go-to for advice, and somebody that's looking to try and get better at drafting or trying to draft better for the upcoming redraft season, is to play some best ball leagues. And there's a ton of them out there. You can find a ton of free ones out there. You can find a ton of cheap entries out there. So go out there, play some best ball. It's a lot of fun. Guys, I do believe that's going to wrap up yet another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Make sure you're tuning in next week. We are going to hit up we're doing the running back rankings next week, and the wide receiver rankings the week after that. So lots of fun coming up there. We've already hit up the quarterback rankings, hit up the tight end rankings. You'll be able to find those on our website, goodoldboysff.com. Make sure you're clicking the subscribe button on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. On that, click the little bell. We do this show live every Tuesday night, 11 p.m. Eastern. Hit us up on the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at Good Old Boys FF. For Kevin and Alex, I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe.